we've had a long journey getting to this point. As a matter of fact, I'm pretty sure Man of Steel was going to be the follow-up to Bryan Singer's Superman Returns, and I know many people are happy that this isn't a follow-up to that movie. And since 1978 now, we've had a pretty diverse anthology of Superman films. Starting off, of course, back in 1978 with the Richard Donner directed Superman the movie, and produced by Ilya and Alexander Salkind. It was I personally, it's a cliche to call it this. I think Superman the movie to this day is the godfather of DC, not just DC, but of comic book films in general. I'd be hard pressed to find a director, whether it be Bryan Singer or Christopher Nolan, who didn't use Superman the movie as a template when they were building origin stories or even sequels for their superhero franchises.
Yeah, I agree. I think the impact that Superman the movie had was huge, and not just felt on a comic book level, but just in film in general. And for me, I think that film's legacy will be that it was the first comic book film that took itself seriously.
Yeah.
You look at the comic book adaptations that were out at that time, or before that, you had the 60s Batman show, you had the 70s Wonder Woman show, or even that poor 70s Spider-Man show.
Yeah.
There were films that didn't do the source material.
Yeah.
And, some things that those shows did were good in their own rights, but or even before that with the George Reeves Adventures of Superman show. Yeah. None of these were the comic book. Yeah. And Superman was not afraid to delve deep into the source material.
Yeah. Yeah, there was no venue that would support comic book adaptations. I mean, Stan Lee classically would talk about how when he was younger, before the comic books even broke out, that if he was at a cocktail party and someone asked what he did, he would say he wrote children's stories because he was always afraid of being ridiculed for writing comic books. It doesn't have the kind of weight that it does nowadays. I mean, obviously there's still the stigma that only geeks or obsessed fans read comic books, which of course is not true. But I think comic books have, because they are now the source material of the biggest blockbusters each year, you'd be hard pressed to find anyone to put comic books down. But back then, the idea of doing an origin story and giving it, as Richard Donner would call it, a verisimilitude and a truthfulness, you wouldn't see it. As a matter of fact, I think if Donner had not directed it, the Salkinds probably would have made it more parody. And I think that's made evident by a lot of the comedic choices in the film. And I'm a strong supporter of Gene Hackman's Lex Luthor. I think he was marvelous. I think he gave a great performance. But a lot of people find it hard to enjoy the film because of a lot of the comedic aspects coming from Lex Luthor and Otis and Miss Tessmacher. But I think that what we got was a much more marginalized comedic value than what we would have probably had gotten had the Salkinds had full control with a different director. Particularly had Richard Lester been the main director of Superman the movie. So
yeah, well, I think Superman 2 is a great example of what Superman would look like, considering that both films were being filmed at the same time. With Superman 1, I was watching the what's it called? Look Up in the Sky documentary.
The retrospective documentary.
Yes, that came out around the time Superman Returns was coming out, and something that Richard Donner says was he didn't like the comedy that was in it, so he tried to, get some of that out of there. And the fact that Superman takes itself so seriously, and related to what I was saying earlier about taking the source material seriously and actually using it, as opposed to 60s Batman, which was a parody of comic books. The fact that it took itself so seriously, just it helped you believe the world, and they set it in a world that was not unlike ours. And feels like so many times you hear that said when producers or directors or whoever talk about an upcoming comic book movie of, we wanted to set it in the real world. It's like, well, that's what all of them do now. So you're not being revolutionary with that.
Yeah,
but
set it in a fake world for once.
Yeah,
like Tim Burton's Batman, which is essentially another universe.
Yeah. Well, the thing with Tim Burton's Batman is it takes elements from different time periods and different worlds, if you will, and creates a world. With Donner's Superman, there's a little bit of that to a degree, but overall, it's definitely set in a world that's familiar to ours.
Yes.
Obviously, Metropolis does not exist, and they fly
it's New York City.
And all that, but it's I think Donner's Superman is obviously it's one of the best comic book films ever made, and but I think it will go on as being recognized as that for all time. I think that will change. I think its legacy will precede itself.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. It's almost hard to. I always whenever doing any sort of review of series and getting to the ones that are particularly good, it's almost hard to even generate conversation. It's remember Sidney Pollack was talking about he was introducing Citizen Kane one night. And he goes, I don't even know what to say about this movie. It's excellent. It's amazing. Watch it. So with Superman the movie, it feels that same way. I mean, more talking about obviously the positives is the epic score, probably in my opinion the greatest opening credit sequence of all time. I still get thrilled by the crystal blue credits whooshing by the camera. I just think that it's sweeping and it really sets the mood for the entire movie.
Yeah, I marvel at the way John Williams was able to create a score that even made it sound like Superman was being said in the song.
Yeah,
that is amazing. The score is, everybody knows that theme.
Yeah,
everybody, even if you've never seen the film, everybody knows everyone just knows that's Superman.
Yeah,
there are a few films that are like that, but the films that have that, the scores are generally done by John Williams.
Yeah, of course.
I think with the exception of Terminator and Bond, the only other movie scores that have such a famous score without even needing to see the film, they're all John Williams.
Yeah.
And I think the music has a lot to do with why the film is so good. It really helps set the tone. The music in Smallville, the music in when he gets to Metropolis, and then the Superman theme, it all is perfect. The music undertones that he has for Lex Luthor.
Yeah.
Just all perfect.
Yeah, he sets the tone beautifully, and I think Donner's score, what Donner was doing with that score, what Williams was doing with that score is what Donner was doing with the film. It felt as though they were taking this film as seriously as David Lean would take an epic like Lawrence of Arabia. It was, the scale of it, when you start off on Krypton and you have these great Shakespearean actors like Brando and Harry Andrews and Trevor Howard, and Maria Schell and Terrence Stamp, and you have this really great elegance about them and this iciness with how they are superior and the crystal structures and it is like watching a very dramatic Shakespearean play. I mean, you would almost, if Brando wasn't wearing the Superman shield on his chest and you were flipping through the channels, you might not even know what you were watching. And I think that's, and then bam, when we're on Earth, then we have this, we have the Midwest we have Smallville, Kansas, and we have the sepia-colored tones and the you have classic actors like Glenn Ford in there, and it's the cheerleaders and the football and the high school, and the amber waves of grain in there. You got it's all American, and then right when you're in the city, then you got the fast hustle and bustle of the city. I mean, you literally have a 3-act structure with the 3 major locations of the movie. It's almost like you're 3 small films combined into one massive epic, and I think that's what's so rewarding about the movies. By the time you get to the end credits, you really felt like you watched something truly epic. I mean, spanning a massive lifetime worth of story, from Brando's Jor-El all the way to Christopher Reeve's Superman spinning the world backwards. You have a you just have a massive epic. And I think that's one of the main enduring qualities about the movie is the fact that it was willing to do Superman in that kind of serious way. And I think that's why it's I think like you said, I think that's why its legacy has been cemented as one of the best.
I agree, and it is one of the most epic films of all time. I know we'll get to this later, but one of the criticisms of Superman Returns was that he never throws a punch and never gets in a fight scene. And it's funny, that doesn't happen in Donna's Superman film either.
I know. That's a very common. It's funny. That's become such a joke. It almost gets frustrating. I remember when the Man of Steel trailer came out, and after he says "excuse me," you see him punching Zod across Metropolis.
First film is Lex Luthor.
Yeah,
he punches Lex Luthor. He's dead. Same with Superman Returns. So the fact that people said, "Oh, what was wrong with Superman Returns?" and there was no action. I guess that's a sign of the times. I mean, when that film came out, you had the X-Men films and the Spider-Man films and Batman Begins, and people were used to their superheroes fighting a villain of equal skill level or what have you. And Superman doesn't have that except for Zod. Really.
Exactly. Especially in the classic films.
Yeah, exactly. That's what for sure. So I don't think that's what's necessary to make a good Superman film.
I agree.
And I think we're going to be able to draw a lot of parallels between the '78 film and Man of Steel. I feel like they're going to be similar, but incredibly different.
I agree.
I think it's going to be another 3-act, 3 different settings, and I think we're going to see a lot of that. But I definitely feel like it's going to be a very different film.
See, I have to. Sorry to cut you off. I feel like I actually might disagree with you on that with the 3-act structure. Personally, from the trailers, I don't know why, but I get this feeling as though we're going to start off with Clark as a young man, and then we're going to see through flashbacks, almost Batman Begins style. I could be completely off on that, but I don't know. I mean, they could do the classic: we start on Krypton, end up in Metropolis, in Smallville, and then finish in Metropolis. They could definitely do something as classic as that, but I don't know. There's something about it that we have got nothing revealed in the trailers. Almost, they've been so good at keeping things hush hush with this movie. So I think it could really go anywhere. But I don't know. I get this Batman Begins vibe from it.
Interesting. That could definitely happen. I didn't think of it like that. And with Nolan and Goyer writing, that could happen. But for me, since we see the whole sequence of him as a baby being put in the ship and all that sort of thing, I figured we were starting on Krypton first, then go into Smallville, and then everything you see of him with the beard and on the boat and all that sort of thing, I thought that might be all kind of like a montage. I'm not sure if we're going to be getting actual scenes with that. Same thing could be said with the Smallville stuff. We see that the one thing of the bus 1,000 times, and we're not seeing a whole lot more besides that, apart from a couple of conversations between Clark and Park Kent. But maybe you could be very right there. But I don't know. We'll see what happens. I didn't think of it like that. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, what's it called? I'm expecting quite a few surprises in that movie. But with Superman in the movie, are there any there are a few criticisms of the movie, particularly the spinning the world backwards. That seems to take a lot of heat, especially nowadays, because I think as I like to call them, I think the realism nuts have got they seem to be taking notes on comic book movies nowadays and trying to find every little inconsistency they can. Don't get me wrong, spinning the world backwards would probably destroy the planet or throw the world. I have no idea what would happen, but how do you feel about spinning the world, the spin of the world backwards, the big grand finale of Superman the movie?
I don't know what people thought at the time. For me now, when I'm looking at this with the 2013 perspective, I don't like it. I feel like it was kind of it's not lazy, but it feels too convenient to say, I can just spin the world backwards whenever I have problems. When we get to Superman 4, he uses the the super kiss on Lois again, and it's like, wow, that's just using that as a
it's his superpowers of convenience is what they are.
Exactly. Yeah. It just felt too convenient to be able to spin the world backwards, and he could fix the world's problems anytime by doing that.
Yeah, I think that's a huge.
The biggest problem I have with it is that when he spins the world backwards, and he comes back to Earth to find Lois, and Lois is trying to start her car, and she's like, all these power lines fell down, and
the gas station blow up.
Yeah, but there's no reason for the earthquake to not happen again. Mm-hmm. Like, he didn't stop that.
That's true.
So I don't think they got the ending. And to be fair, the ending with the world spinning backwards was originally intended for Superman 2.
For the sequel, yeah. Yeah, that was how Lois was going to forget.
Taking the missile, throwing it into space, and it breaks open the Phantom Zone, and that's the end of the film.
Yeah.
I get why they didn't do that ending, and when the future of Superman was, in question at that time, I get why they wanted a more definitive ending. But I don't really love the spinning the world backwards ending in the Donner cut, the Richard Donner cut of Superman 2. I'm not a fan of that anyway, but it made more sense to put it there. And the original ending of Superman, when you know what was intended, I get why they did what they did.
Yeah, it's funny. I love Superman the movie, Superman 2, and the Richard Donner cut of Superman 2. But I agree that there are. It seems like that you have a great film, and then the endings always seem to go slightly bust. I'm one of these. If I'm so emotionally engaged that I forget about it, then I usually give it a pass. I remember the story about when Steven Spielberg was making Jaws, and he had Roy Scheider shoot the tank inside the shark's mouth, and Peter Benchley was telling Spielberg, this is absurd. No one will ever believe that. It's ridiculous. And Spielberg said to him, if I have the audience emotionally involved at this point, they will buy anything. And he's absolutely right. So I think the reason why I always give the spinning the world backwards a pass is because of Christopher Reeve's performance when he screams at the skies and spin and just hurls into the atmosphere, and he hears both Brando's Jor-El and Glenn Ford's Jonathan Kent. I think that hearing the two fathers at that moment of vulnerability, there's something really, really strong about that, and the fact that he's willing to bend the laws of time and space for the woman he loves. It's like I said, call me a sap, but sometimes the emotional aspects of it allows me to really suspend my disbelief to the point where such a ridiculous stunt I'll give a pass to. But I totally agree, though.
Yeah, I definitely buy it more, because it's funny that you mention it that way, because I remember the first time I saw it, the spinning the world backwards didn't bother me. Mm-hmm. It was upon other viewings that I started to realize, that doesn't really make a lot of sense. Mm-hmm. But it definitely, the first time I saw it, just you felt his pain, and I was shocked to see Lois die. Mm-hmm. And so you buy that he would do this drastic thing. So yeah, no, I agree.
Mm. And like I said, another one of the criticisms of the film is Gene Hackman's Lex Luthor. And personally, I've always gone on the defensive for him as well, because people have become so accustomed to the modern Lex Luthor, who ironically didn't come to being until the 1980s, when John Byrne sort of crafted him after sort of a Donald Trump type, where he was a corporate titan of sorts. And I think with Michael Rosenbaum nowadays, you have people really loyal to that adaptation of the character.
Exactly. I think when Byrne changed Lex and made him a billionaire tycoon, it was because the mad scientist wasn't exactly a relatable thing for readers. Like, Superman's going to fight the evil scientist, and you can buy him fighting the evil business tycoon, because we can all relate to that. And at the time, in 78, Gene Hackman's Lex, in my opinion, was very much straight out of the comics. It was a mad scientist, a wacky scientist, and I think Hackman's performance for the material of that time is spot on. And even today, there's a reason why people try and make Lex funny in other adaptations. Like, sometimes Rosenbaum will have that. And obviously, Spacey had that. But Hackman's Lex, I just have so much fun watching him.
Yeah,
and
he's a
even
blast
more
to
so
watch.
in Superman 2.
I agree.
When he's reacting with Zod. I feel sorry for him in Superman 4.
I feel sorry for him in Superman 3 when he has an imposter playing him.
Is he in Superman 3?
No, he isn't, but Robert Vaughn is playing a ripoff of him. So I certainly felt bad for him in that one.
Yeah, but, when they treated Donna so badly, he was like, I'm not coming back, and I don't blame him.
No, I can't either.
Yeah, he's an actor, Gene Hackman. So, the fact that you had such a big-time star in the leading villain role, lead antagonist, I think he's excellent as Lex.
I agree, and I think that I think also if you think about how well balanced it is, people complain about how he's funny and he's comedic in a very dark way. But I think that there was great foresight on Donner's part because, you were going to have the cold and calculating Zod in 2, and they were going to make an alliance. So you can't have two cold, calculating bosses knocking heads. That would have made for something unbelievably boring to have two stone-faced villains trying to one-up each other. It would be a snooze fest. Having essentially Zod's mirror on Earth be the complete antithesis to him, where instead of being a commander of men, instead of being this almost Shakespearean and very cold and icy character, Lex is bouncing off of walls. He's comedic. He's funny. He's a real jerk. But both of them are egomaniacal. Both of them constantly speak of themselves in the third person. Both of them are very vain people. Both of them keep two henchmen around who essentially make them look better by just standing next to them. So I like the fact that there was a foresight in having essentially Zod's equal, not so much his equal, but his mirror on Earth be someone who is the antithesis to him. So I think I agree with you. I prefer Hackman's Luthor, particularly in Superman 2. I feel like there's more for him to do in that movie, as opposed to just sitting in his lair deducing evil things to do. He's really active in Superman 2. He goes to the Arctic. He invades the fortress. He instigates the whole battle at the end of the movie in Metropolis. So I guess wrapping up Superman the movie, because like I said, we could talk about how good it is all day. The performances are marvelous. I think there's a reason why people consider Christopher Reeve to be the ultimate and the best, and it's hard for people to grasp any other actor in the role. For me, it's easier to grasp other people in the role, but there are certain actors like Sean Connery as James Bond, or Harrison Ford as Han Solo, or Indiana Jones, and Christopher Reeve as Superman, that it will be the go-to person I always think of no matter what, and that's because that's who they were for me at that time. Reeve doesn't get enough credit as an actor as well. The way he was able to distinguish between Clark Kent and Superman, I think, still holds up as one of the most iconic alternate identity performances, because the way he plays that bumbling fool, I can imagine people not paying enough attention to him to realize that he is the Man of Steel. You could tell people would not give him a second look on the street because he's such a bumbling fool.
Exactly. The fact that he made Clark, the polar opposite of Superman. Mm-hmm. And I've heard people say, I don't like his Clark because it's too bumbling idiot. And okay, first of all, that was the original Clark. In the comics, he was the polar opposite.
Exactly.
And the writers chose to go with that, and Reeve chose to run with that. Mm-hmm. He took that and he did his own thing, but he managed to make it conceivable or plausible that that people wouldn't be able to tell the two apart.
Yeah.
So I think he did an excellent job, and he was an excellent actor. Even in other films, he was tremendous.
Yeah, absolutely.
And he to me, he's the best Superman. And I'm not sure if that'll ever change, because he managed to. Donna did the best thing possible by casting an unknown, because people weren't looking at billboards and saying, "Oh, look, it's Robert Redford as Superman."
Oh my
they were
God!
Looking at billboards and saying, "Oh, look, it's Superman."
Yeah.
So just excellent.
Yeah. And you gotta give them all credit to Richard Donner and Lynn Stallmaster, the casting director, because at the time Chris Reeve, I think, was like a real tall glass of milk. He was skinny and blonde hair, I think, at the time. So the fact that they really took a risk on him, but he played his heart out. And I think one thing I will be consistently saying through each of these movies is Christopher Reeve is excellent as Superman. He never relented. He never gave a poor performance, even when the material wasn't particularly good. He always played his heart out, and he never phoned it in. He never did not care about that performance. So, got to give credit where credit's due.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and the rest of the performance in the film is great. I always loved Margot Kidder as Lois Lane and Brando as Jor-El. I think he adds a great gravitas to it. I mean, obviously he was doing it for the money, and he was slightly insane at the time when the movie came out. But it's still it's one of those situations where had he not taken that part, it's a wonder if the movie would have gotten off the ground, because he was such a big name, and coming off the heels of The Godfather, he could have done anything. So I still love those few brief scenes with Jor-El, particularly a scene that was only included in the extended cut where Superman speaks to him after exposing himself to the world as Superman. And
I love that scene. I was shocked to find out that wasn't in the original cut. The first time I saw the film was the extended cut, and I didn't realize.
I think that's one of the most touching scenes in the movie, that he can't embrace his father. It's heartbreaking, and it lends itself. That scene lends itself once again to the idea that, in my opinion, Superman's greatest weakness is not kryptonite. It's not Zod. It's not Luthor. It's not anyone who can hurt him. It's his compassion. That's his greatest weakness. And so, the people who want to say, Superman, he's too powerful and it takes a green rock to kill him, I think that clearly they're not reading enough into it. And you don't really have to read too much into it either. I mean, I'm pretty sure Zod even says that to him in Superman 2, the Richard Donner cut. Your fatal weakness is your compassion.
He actually cares for these people.
Yeah, like pets.
Exactly. He cares about humanity, and the ironic thing is that he's not human.
So, I mean, obviously, I think we've beaten a dead horse. Superman, the movie is, I think we both agree, it's excellent. It's a damn fine viewing, and I would recommend, if anyone hasn't seen it, I would say if it's hard for them to watch an older movie because of the effects or the acting, I'd say get a copy of it on Blu-ray, or try to find a screening of it on the big screen, because I think it really is great education to go back and see where most, if not all, the tropes kind of began with that movie, especially with the adaptations.
I agree, yeah. So much of that film has transcended into comics as well, so it's definitely an important film for Superman as well.
I agree. And moving on to Superman 2, I'd say, starting with Richard Lester's Superman 2, I still absolutely adore this movie. I'd say I think it has aged poorer than the first movie, purely because of the comedy that Richard Lester seemed to want to inject into it, particularly towards the end of the movie, where Zod, Ursa, and Nan are using their super breath to hurl everyone into the streets. Watching that scene in the Lester cut versus the Donner cut back to back, it is frightening how different the two cuts are. Just all Donner, Michael Fuller, the editor, had to do was edit out the slapstick, and suddenly that scene carries a lot more weight, and suddenly it's so much more epic. I think Lester really tried too hard to inject his own bit of humor that he had in the 3 and 4 Musketeers movies that the Salkinds produced a few years prior, and I think it really aged the movie.
Yeah, the comedy in the film is the reason why I can't fully say that I love the film. I did a review of this film, I guess a few years back now, for a contest, and it was the first time I really sat down and really tried to analyze it, and it feels like, it really does feel like two different directors have put this film together.
Yeah.
Because the fact that they couldn't reshoot the Gene Hackman scenes because he didn't return when they fired Donner.
Yeah.
His scenes feel like one tone. and so many other things just feel like something else. And like in that whole scene in where are they? They're in Houston, the planet Houston. So Zod is, trying to torture these people, and they do a lot of comedy things during that. And then they do the scene where they go to the White House, and it's kind of frightening.
Yeah, they're beating the hell out of the United States military.
Yeah, there's that great scene in the Donner Cut where he picks up a rifle and he just starts shooting people. Not that he needs it, because he's amused by the weapons that humans have.
Yeah, he likes watching them fall down. Yeah, he likes seeing the bodies hit the floor. There's also an extra beat that they put into the Donner Cut where one of the Secret Service agents loses his guns and he goes into the fetal position, terrified as Ursa is coming up to him, and it just cuts to her staring at him with this sick smile, and then she kicks him in the face. It's almost like the way it was originally filmed. Donner wanted to show that these three were not only doing this because they needed to get to the president. They were enjoying themselves. They probably could have finished it off quicker, but they wanted to take their time with these guys, the Secret Service and the military. They were the National Guard. They were ripping these guys apart and just tearing the White House up. But I know that Donner originally and Tom Mankiewicz originally in the script had it that instead of just landing in East Houston, Idaho, which I think was the town. They went around the world and were destroyed. They destroyed the Eiffel Tower and all these monuments, and were terrorizing different cities. Yeah, it would have. It's funny because that's what you would see nowadays in a comic book. If they did that, you might see that in Man of Steel. But it's funny how such a drastic difference can be seen between the Donner Cut and Lester, particularly in the villains. Zod, Ursa, and you could even see a slight difference in Terrence Stamp's performance when you're watching a Donner scene. He's a little more reserved. He's a little, I used this word to describe him before, he's a little icy in those scenes. But with Lester, he seems to be a little more comic book. He seems to be a little more flamboyant. And then, of course, the biggest difference is Non between the two movies. Non in the Donner Cut is simply like the brutal attack dog that is there to crush anyone who goes near his master. But in Lester, he seems to be amused by noises and burnt snake carcasses and flashing lights, and he makes these weird squeaky noises like a puppy. It's
but it took those noises out.
Oh my god, I know, those were just dreadful. It's funny how we started off with the good things with Superman the movie. We're kind of starting off with the bad things with Lester. There are so many things about Superman 2 that I still love. In terms of the Lester version. It does feel like it has two tones, but I will say that I think that considering this movie probably should have been a major disaster, it really is a damn good movie considering it probably should have been a lot worse.
It's better than it has the right to be considering the circumstances.
Yeah.
One of the things I really like in the Lester cut is the sequence in Paris. I liked that. We got to see Lois be this reporter who puts it all on the line. I liked that scene. Yeah. I didn't need it in the Donner Cut, but I liked it in the Lester Cut.
I agree.
I'll just say this now because I want to bring it up now. Seeing as we're talking about Lester versus Donner, not just the comedy that Lester put into the film, but the random amount of powers that they have.
Oh God.
The super kiss is one thing, but the fruit roll-up shield.
My friends and I always say we don't talk about the cellophane shield. We don't talk about the cellophane shield. It's just so dreadful.
It's terrible. It makes no sense as well. Like, do you just have these lying around on people? Like, what? The levitating, the random part where Clark multiplies himself, and you think they're
I used to play this game at school. Yeah, when he says I used to play this game, and you're thinking, what school are you talking about?
That
is ridiculous.
Stuff, he just added random powers for the sake of adding them.
Yeah.
And that got even more ridiculous sometimes as the films went on.
Interesting tidbit. Lester, I read an interview with him, and he claimed that representatives from DC Comics were there when they were filming the additional scenes in the Fortress of Solitude with the special powers, and apparently approved of those powers. And I have to say, I hope that those representatives were fired the next day.
Well, I think the deal with that is this was, Superman 1 was such a success, so they probably thought, do what you want. You guys know what you're doing.
Yeah.
And at the time, it's different to today, where comic book fans are so much more vocal.
Yeah.
It feels like people who have never really picked up a comic book are suddenly critical about if things are different from comics.
Yeah.
Like, that's sort of the time we live in right now, where it's cool to nitpick and be negative towards films. Like, the fact that honest trailers and everything wrong with the movie in 5 minutes or whatever those videos are,
mm-hmm.
those videos get millions of views
mm-hmm.
because people like that right now.
Yeah.
People love being negative and everyone thinks they're a critic. Back to Superman 2, at the time, I think DC were just happy to have their biggest character on the big screen, so
mm-hmm.
they didn't care what they did differently.
Yeah.
The fact that the George Reeves show was different to the comic books, that they were used to Superman being different to the comics, so they were probably like, yeah, okay. That being said, there are powers for the sake of powers there.
Yeah.
And the fact that not even DC, but anybody working on the film stopped and went, okay, why does he have this? Does he need this?
Mm-hmm.
They didn't have those sequences in the original script. Why do we need them now?
Yeah.
And I don't think Lester could answer that himself, or anyone who reworked the script or what have you. I don't think anyone can answer that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where the problem lies for me.
Yeah, and I looking at the Donner cut versus the Lester cut, particularly in the Fortress of Solitude battle, is in the Donner cut, it literally is just a match of wits. It's interesting that Superman, he tried to duke it out with them, and they destroyed half the city, and it shows that he's a real tactician, that he thought, I can't beat him here because more people might die, so let me take him back to the fortress and see if I can use my own wits to defeat him. And there's no duke, there's no fight there, but Lester felt that they needed to load the scene up with these really weird shenanigans with, like you said, the cellophane S and the weird, the weird doubles of Superman showing up, and then the battle of telepathy with the long finger streams. I just felt like I love the fact that Donner really was ahead of his time, because I think at that point he thought we could end this movie with a match of wits as opposed to having a big duke 'em out fight that we just had. I think that's what makes the Donner cut superior in my mind.
Yeah, I think the Donner cut is superior as well, and like what you were just saying with the Battle of Wits and the Fortress of Solitude and stuff like that, I definitely feel like when Lester was brought on, they lost sight of what the original intent of the film was going to be, which is a shame. I also like that he took the fight away from Metropolis.
In Superman 2, especially the Richard Donner cut, Superman really tries to keep it as contained as possible. I mean, during the fight, you see him being distracted by trying to save people. I mean, they want to fight, but he can't. He will get easily distracted, and he'll throw himself in front of the bus. He grabs the massive the piece of the building, or that massive antenna, from falling on that stupid mother who is standing there and not moving with her child. And he gets so distracted by the people. And that to me is the most Superman thing about him. It's he's not focused on hurting them or killing the villain. He's more focused on trying to stop the collateral damage. I think obviously one of the most iconic things about the two movies is Terrence Stamp as General Zod. It'd be hard to find a villain as iconic, and the line "kneel before Zod" has become a part of pop culture. I think people who haven't even seen the first two Superman films seem to frequent that line. It's something that people can easily identify. And I'd say one thing that I absolutely adore about Terrence Stamp is that he really turns a rather two-dimensional character in the movie into someone really fascinating to watch. You can't keep your eyes off of him.
I agree. I've often thought of Terrence Stamp's Zod as the reason I like Zod.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't read a whole lot of Zod in the comics, and I don't find him to be... I'm not saying this every time he's every appearance, but a lot of times I don't think he's as interesting as what he is in Superman 2.
I agree.
Terrence Stamp brings an intensity to the role. He's really, really fantastic, and he wasn't this, bulked up big guy, and where you saw him and you went, yeah, that guy's probably going to kick Superman's ass. Like, you don't look at him like that just by looking at him. But with the intensity that he brings to the role, the way he delivers his dialogue, there's such a great sense of threat when he's around.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and once again, as we were saying earlier, I think in this movie we get pretty much the first supervillain team up in this movie before it became done horribly in most movies. Yeah. You get Lex Luthor and General Zod in the same scene and in the same plot, and I think it's terrific. And I always love when comic book movies don't kill off their villains in their first movie. I like when they have the characters overlap and they have other villains interact with each other. It shows the real the scope of the comic books that there are multiple enemies and that they do conspire from time to time. And I've said this I've said this to my friends all the time. The dynamic that Lex and Zod have in the film is the dynamic that I wish Two-Face and the Riddler had in Batman Forever. Whereas instead of two bafflingly, laughing and bouncing off of walls, you have one of them standing there, ice cold, just looking and shaking his head at the other one who is constantly making cracks and acting, clownish. I just think that their chemistry is fantastic, especially when Zod is constantly threatening to kill him and Lex kind of just laughs it off. I think that their chemistry is just terrific.
I agree. The fact that this was the first supervillain team up on film and it created a cliche, or started a cliche in a lot of superhero films is a shame because it was done so well here.
Yeah.
And not so much in Batman Returns or other films that followed it. There's a lot of times, I think a good example of, when this was done again was Iron Man 2. Like, you got the wacky business tycoon, and then you got the guy who's a real threat to the hero. Yeah. Physically. Yeah. There's definitely that there, and I like when the team up is done in that way. Yeah. It's like a yin and a yang type of thing. You got two, they both have different strengths. Yes. So I like the way it's done in Superman 2. Yeah. And it's a well done team up that actually makes sense. Yeah. And the fact that Luthor thinks he's smart enough to manipulate these incredibly powerful people, I think is hilarious. And the fact that he wants a beachfront property, Australia has always been. Yeah, Australia. Yeah, that's one of my all-time favorites. I love kicking my feet up on a desk and doing the Australia with the Nixon fingers up. Some people just don't get the joke; they think I'm crazy. But I absolutely, I always love that. That's one thing I love about Lester Superman 2 is when he says Australia and then it cuts to the globe and you see Australia and then you see Lois chain smoking. Yeah. I always love that. And speaking of Lois, actually, I have to say one thing I loved about Superman 2 is. I liked the love story a lot. I mean, a lot of people give Superman shit because he's boffing Lois Lane up in the fortress while the world's taking a real hit. But the thing I liked about the love story in this movie is the conversation that Lois and Clark have at the end of both movies, but in different ways. It's Lois saying that she's selfish because she wants Superman for herself, but she can't because she knows she'll be distracting him from his duties. I think sometimes the directors of those movies don't address the fact that these women they're not meaning to be selfish, but they're coming off as that. But I like how Lois she says flat out, "I am selfish when it comes to you. I'm jealous of the whole world." In the breadth of comic book films, Superman 2 is one of the only times where I found myself rooting for the love story and really, really being there and wanting to see them succeed at the end. It's funny. I guess I have a little bit of a different view on the love story. I like it I don't buy Superman's actions in the film. The fact that he just changes himself to be human. First of all, I think that's kind of bonkers. But just him doing that, and then Lois says, I want the man I fell in love with. It's like, you could have told him that earlier. But I don't understand why he does that. I don't see why he couldn't be Superman and be with Lois. I get the notion of, I don't want to share you with the whole world, but that's coming from her, and I don't see why it was like the only way I can possibly be with Lois is if I'm a human too. I don't know how we got to that. I feel like there should have been another scene or something.
I think that they probably...
Maybe they could have done something where he and Lois were talking about the future, and then he came to the realization of, if I want to have a life with this person, I need to be human. And but to me, we didn't see how we got to that. We just got to that after sleeping with her. Which was strange.
Yeah, I think I always took it as when he's talking to either his mother or his father, depending on what cut you're watching. I feel as though they are implying, I could be totally wrong, I could be reading too much, and I always thought that both Jor-El and Lara were implying that if you want to be with this woman, as if you want to have a child with this woman, you need to be human, otherwise your body chemistry is not going to work and you won't be able to produce a child. I could be completely wrong on that point. I think that if they were implying that, I could understand why Mankiewicz and Donner didn't want to literally spell that out, because they knew families were going to be seeing this, and they didn't want Lara and Jor-El saying, you need to change it up so you could bang her. I always felt that it was implied, but like I said, I could be reading too much into it. And also, I think depending on which cut you watch, does he sleep with her before? I think in the Donner cut, he sleeps with her before.
You're right.
Before he loses his powers.
It's been a while since I've seen the Leslie cut. He sleeps with her after he gets his powers, doesn't he?
Yeah, and I'd say, once again, going on the I love looking at these movies back to back sometimes, particularly in the scenes where Superman goes to Lara and then Superman goes to Jor-El to speak for their acceptance in his decision. It's the way Reeve plays both roles. He probably could have done the same performance for both, but when he's talking to his mother, it really seems like a son who's talking to his mom about the girl he loves. Like the way he says, "Mother, I love her," with a twinkle in his eye. He's like, he really is smitten, and he thinks like, she'll understand. She'll understand why I'm doing this. But with Jor-El, he points his finger at him and says, "Father, I love her," and is defiant. It's like he's about to slam the door behind him, in defiance of his dad. I love the fact that Reeve made the choice in both those performances to realize that he's talking to his mother in one and his father in the other. And I love the humanity in those scenes.
So do I. I'm still not completely sold on how he got. Like, I get what you're saying, and I agree. The fact that it's not said in the film, I think, is a problem.
Yeah.
But I understand why they don't come out and say that.
And spell it out.
But the fact that they kind of beat around the bush is like, well, then it's not giving the audience the full story. And, I don't quite buy... He's been with Lois for a fairly short amount of time as well. He's only known her, it seems like, for under a year, and he's ready to give up being Superman, which he's been for about the same amount of time.
Yeah.
So,
he hangs it up pretty early when you think about it. When you look at these, like, if you look at the Donner cut, you would imagine it takes place, like, roughly a week after the first one, because at the opening of the movie, Perry White is reading Lois's article about Lex Luthor being sentenced to life in prison. And you'd imagine that only a short amount of time has probably passed since the first movie. Especially considering they're following the continuity that the missile was thrown into outer space and set them free. So at that point, Superman's only been Superman for maybe a couple of weeks. He's only known Lois for maybe a month. So it's incredible how there is a great emotional weight. But at the same time, when you really look at it, you're like, he's really only known her for a short time. What the fuck is he doing? So I love Superman 2, both of them, but they are not without their faults. It's hard when you watch really, really sharp films like The Dark Knight, and then you watch Superman 2, and Superman 2 is amazing, but you at the same time you see so many cracks in the foundation, especially if you just think about certain things, they kind of fall apart. For me, I think the good outweighs the bad with both versions.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So
I agree. I definitely think it's a great film, not without its flaws, but I agree that the good outweighs the bad.
I would say that one of the main reasons I preferred the Donner cut is the scene where Jor-El depletes the final remaining energy within himself to give Superman his abilities back. Obviously, it's very, like, once again, that's another idea. When you think about it, it just feels a bit strange, especially considering he's already dead. So it's kind of like a computer program, like giving up its last energy. But I do like the fact that he does pay a price. When he goes back there to get his powers back, he now gives up any chance he has to talk to his father. So like I said, we both agree that Donner cut is better than is stronger. I would say, I'm not gonna say completely better, but I'd say it's stronger.
It's a superior cut. Yeah,
it's hard to look at it only because the Donner cut is still an incomplete film. It feels as though you're watching the dailies or a rough cut of an unfinished movie, and it's really fascinating when you look into the history of Superman 2. It's I'd say the making of it sometimes is even more thrilling than the movie itself. It's really an interesting piece, but it is also particularly fun to watch him, watch him in close proximity to them and take your notes of what you like and what you don't like. I think you'll almost find it even between the two of them, which I think is fascinating.
Yeah,
and
I agree.
So moving on to Superman 3. The much either beloved or maligned threequel. This seemed to start the curse of the threes with superhero films. For a short background, obviously most people refer to this one as the one with Richard Pryor. I refer to it as a Richard Pryor comedy co-starring Christopher Reeve. And this was a classic example of why producers should just produce, and they shouldn't be the ones dominating the story. Apparently, Ilya Salkind, the son of Alexander Salkind, had the idea that Brainiac would be the central villain, and that he and Mr. Mxyzptlk were going to join forces, and at some point Supergirl was going to cameo to help her cousin, and then that would spin off into the next Supergirl. I have no idea how it would have turned out under Lester. For all we know, that might have turned out to be a disaster. It might have been a complete wreck. But in terms of story and mythology, that does seem like the logical choice when you're following up Zod, Ursa, and Non, and Lex Luthor. You want to follow it up with a pretty strong antagonist, and Brainiac at the time was the only really good one to go to use next. And I believe they heard Richard Pryor mention on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson that he wanted to be in a Superman movie and took it a bit literally. Nowadays, like, I've heard Tom Hanks say he wants to play James Bond, but you don't see him in Skyfall. So, there are just certain decisions that probably, should have been made differently or not made at all. But in Superman 3, we see Superman facing off with Richard Pryor, who's a computer programmer, and he gets chosen by a corrupt business tycoon who is more or less Lex Luthor light, as I like to call him, and uses him to get him coffee or something. I can't.
His master plan is to control the sales and the distribution of coffee.
Coffee. Okay. Well, man loves his coffee.
That's his big plan to control coffee. That is dumb.
Yeah.
Talking about Superman 2, the notion of the villain team up and how there were two opposites of the same thread, and so with this we have two bumbling morons.
Exactly.
Not that Lex Luthor Light is a bumbling moron, but he has the stupidest plan in the world.
Yeah.
And whatever reason, Superman feels it's his duty to stop him to do that, and whether it's Richard Pryor or it's the flicking of the peanuts or it's whatever it is, this film just does not work on so many levels.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard for me to watch. I think the reason why it's hard for me to watch, a lot of people, and I know a lot of people have referred to it as a guilty pleasure, and that they could watch it. They can enjoy it sometimes when they're drinking, which I totally understand. Some people really enjoy it, and I'm glad they enjoy it. But the reason why it's hard for me to enjoy it particularly is I always have it in the back of my head that this is following Superman 2. So in my mind, I'm thinking to myself, he just saved the world from General Zod, who took over the planet. He gave up his powers. His relationship with Lois Lane is non-existent. All this incredible epicness happened, whether you're watching Donner Cut or the Lester version. And then in this one, he's trying to stop a quote-unquote mastermind from trying to control the sales of coffee. It's just I am of the mind where if you want to go smaller in scale for a sequel because you don't want to make it too big, I am all for that. I think that. I think a lot of directors are smart to make that decision, and that they, it might get stale if you have them save the city, then save the world, then save the universe. It just feels like, okay, it's getting a little out of hand. Yeah. So I don't mind every now and again when you get like a little episode where it's something smaller. But if it's gonna be smaller, at least make it interesting. Or at least somewhat like you could like understand why the villain is doing what he's doing. I think personally, I don't want to be one of those who says I could have written it better, but I think that what they should have done is if they wanted to go smaller in scale to the first two, it should have just been a story of Superman battling his villainous twin, whether that be Bizarro, or whether that be the dark colored Superman suit douchebag that we got in Superman 3. Yeah. I think that alone would have been a damn fine movie had they just taken that idea and run with it.
The other thing I like about the film are the scenes in Smallville. I think there's a lot of heart there. I think that is interesting, him returning and seeing this girl that he was in love with. And I really like Annette O'Toole as Lana Lang.
Me too.
And I like those scenes in the film, and I don't like saying I hate the film because I like those scenes. Yeah. But when we move on past that, the film just goes more and more and more downhill. Yeah. And it's really a shame that this was how far Superman fell. Yeah. And I think it's obvious how much Richard Donner really had to do with the first two films being as good as they were. Yeah. Because you take him out of the equation, and this is what we got.
Exactly. Yeah. I agree with you. I do love the Smallville scenes. I think that did have a lot of heart in it, and I think that they could have done some really good things with that. I think that it's a shame when you start watching this movie and the opening credits alone are, first of all, they're the most god-awful opening credits I've ever seen. You can barely read the names as they're whooshing past. Looks like they're mopping the floor as they're going past. And you have this Laurel and Hardy type music in the background. You have the Pamela Stevenson character walking around, and all the guys are turning their heads, and weird slapstick is happening. And you really are looking at this with, like, I watch that with my jaw on the ground sometimes. I'm just thinking, what happened to the opening credit sequences, with the titles and the stars and the recap of the previous movie and the epic John Williams theme? I mean, I understand that the Salkinds were businessmen, but to believe so foolhardily that just because you had Superman in your movie that you could do whatever you wanted, it's producing 101 that, yes, you can have an icon in your movie, but you need to have a good story with that icon. You can't just throw them around. And Superman 3 is a perfect example of that. Christopher Reeve at this point was Superman. He gave a great performance. He was terrific as evil Superman as well. He was also I think he was the most jacked that he's ever been. He really, at that point, looked like the ideal Superman. And they threw him out.
In the comics, they started to draw him like Arnold Schwarzenegger. Like he had this gigantic physique. And I think Reeves might have taken a look at the comics and gone, oh, maybe I should get a little bit bigger so I fit the mold for Superman, and he did that.
Yeah.
I never doubt his dedication to the role, and he's great in this film.
He is when he's on screen. When he has. It's funny when you watch the movie and you see the scenes with Pryor and the three buffoons, and you're with them for so long, and then we cut to Christopher Reeve, and you kind of snap back, and you're like, oh, this is a Superman movie. And you're like, there's Christopher Reeve, there's Clark Kent, there's Superman. I forgot I was watching a Superman movie, and I think therein lies the biggest problem is. You can throw everything out, what you like and what you don't like about the movie. You don't make Superman a supporting character in a film called Superman 3. You just don't do that.
Yeah. What you were talking about earlier with the opening credits as well, I kind of treat that similar to they were the ending credits, I guess, but in Iron Man 3, just how it had a completely different tone to the other films, and it didn't have the
AC/DC?
The usual... Yeah, well, it didn't have AC/DC for one thing, but when the beginnings of both the Iron Man films of this shocking opening, and then it goes ting, and it says Iron Man or Iron Man 2.
Yeah.
With Iron Man 3, it didn't have that, and at the end, instead it had that montage that was more, like Kick-Ass more than Iron Man, and...
It felt almost a little Tarantino-esque, actually.
He spelled out. It was like, this does not feel like the same tone as the other films.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happened here.
Mm-hmm.
You had this slapstick opening as opposed to the montage throughout the universe and the big, bombastic, titles and steady slapstick opening.
Yeah.
It just doesn't fit.
It doesn't fit. I'll tell you though one thing. I've seen television broadcasts. They have the opening credits over the stars, and they have the John Williams theme, or at least a version of it. And and then it cuts to the slapstick opening. So in a way, I'm almost glad they didn't have the John Williams opening theme, because it just to go from the big epic opening credits to then something slapstick just feels they might as well have just gone with the slapstick, because at least they're being honest about the movie that they're making there. Like with that opening credits, they're not underselling it. They're telling you flat out, turn around now if this is not what you want to see.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I didn't think of it like that. Yeah. If you were expecting Superman or Superman 2, this is instead what you're going to get.
Exactly.
So that's a good point. I thought of it like that.
Yeah. But there are pluses to the film. I said Annette O'Toole did. I like the fact that they make her kind of an airhead in the movie. She's kind of a klutz. I think that she's so different from Lois Lane. It's different enough where it doesn't feel like you're getting Clark Kent and Lois Lane Part 2, or Superman and Lois Lane Part 2. You're getting Clark Kent and Lana Lang. You're getting two drastically different characters. It's almost like you're getting a completely different love story, and I appreciated that.
I also appreciate the fact as a fan that Annette O'Toole got to play the role, considering the fact that she was a big Superman fan.
Yeah.
The fact that she's been able to have a career linked to Superman with Smallville, I really appreciate. And,
absolutely.
When you hear her talk about Superman, she talks about Superman with such great passion. So I think it's great that as she was a fan who got to be part of this film. It's a shame it had to be this film.
Yeah,
but,
it set up a better one.
I know she was a fan of Lana Lang, so that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I do find it funny that when I revisited Superman 3 and hearing her talk so lovingly to Clark like a lover kind of creeps me out, because when I hear her voice, I hear Martha Kent. Because
that's true, yeah.
She'll always, for me, she's my favorite Martha Kent right now. I always love her in that part. And speaking of Margot Kidder, she was able to get out of this madness pretty early when she gets pretty much kicked out of the movie. She says she's going to Bermuda, I think it was, at the beginning of the movie.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, and she...
I think they did that because
she pissed off the producers.
She pissed them off, yeah, for how they treated Donna. And so they went, okay, you're only going to be in a scene.
They did her a favor.
She got the best deal out of anyone.
She did. She got paid for the movie, and she got a little screen time, and then she didn't have to be in the mess. So she definitely I'd say she probably got the better end of that deal.
Yeah, it's one of those films where I don't have a whole lot to say. I guess there are things that I like and so much that I don't. I will talk about Superman 4 soon, I guess, but I will say that this is my least favorite Superman.
I think it's most people's.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people have said they dislike 4 more, and that's totally valid.
Yeah.
For me, the thing with 3 is that it was still, they were still trying to be Superman 1 and 2.
Yeah.
And that's where it went wrong for me. Like, the fact that we were still off the heels of a great film, and this is what they gave us, is really disappointing. The problem with Superman 4, they at least had Gene Hackman, and I think their ambitions were good.
Yeah.
I like the initial concept of the story. The execution was poor, and they didn't have a budget. You heard it. The thing with Superman 3 is that they didn't care.
Exactly.
I feel like they didn't care about trying to make a Superman film. They were trying to make a comedy.
Yeah.
And, so the little bit of heart that's there with small little scenes is completely, insulted by the rest of the film.
Yeah.
So that's why I dislike Superman 3 the most.
No, I agree with that, and I think you hit a point there. Is that the big debate always is what's worse, 3 or 4? And I personally, I think everyone is right anytime they talk about it. I think the irony of that is that you're looking at a yin yang with the two of them. Is 3 had the budget but no heart, 4 had the heart but no budget. It's so sad how it works out like that, though, because if you could only transplant the story from 4 into the budget of 3, you might actually have a damn fine trilogy on your hands. But as it stands, you get 2 great opening acts, and then it just flounders after that.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like if you had the budget of 3 and you did Superman 4, you'd maybe have something that's similar to. You'd have something that's like Spider-Man 3 or X-Men 3 or Iron Man 3, where it's a film that isn't good but has good moments, but you still care about the characters. I don't care about the characters in Superman 3.
Not at all.
I definitely feel like the script for 4 is poor, and when we get to it, we'll talk about Nuclear Man and all that stuff. But there were good concepts there that just need to be fleshed out more and properly thought through.
Yeah.
With Superman 3, that's just non-existent.
I agree. But just just before we segue into 4, one thing that particularly bothered me about 3 is that I think most people agree Richard Pryor is one of the greatest comedians of all time, and he's been labeled as such, and he had some great comedies in the 80s, Silver Streak and See No Evil, Hear No Evil, and some really great stuff. The biggest issue is the Salkinds were hell-bent on having him in this film and doing his comedy shtick, but Richard Pryor was a raunchy comedian. He just threw caution to the wind and said whatever was on his mind. This is a guy who didn't mince words. So the fact that they put him in this movie and then he couldn't do the shtick that he wants, that he does. So what was the point? Why would you bring what's it called, the best steak chef in the country to a vegan restaurant? It's pointless. You have a great comedian with great comedic timing and great comedic value, and you have him doing the complete opposite of what makes him funny. So you were literally not firing on any cylinders. You don't use your best asset, which is Christopher Reeve's Superman, and then you put all your money in Richard Pryor, who isn't even allowed to do the kind of comedy that he wants to because it just doesn't fit with Superman. I don't know how they didn't realize this in pre-production.
Yeah, it's funny. I've actually never seen a Richard Pryor film apart from this. So I don't know his work.
I would recommend Silver Streak. I would recommend Silver Streak if you got time. It's him and Gene Wilder. Gene Wilder's the main character, and it takes place on a train. It's sort of like a caper. It's hilarious. It's got some really great moments with the two of them. So if you're gonna watch a Richard Pryor movie, watch that. Don't watch Superman 3.
I love Gene Wilder, so I'll check that out. But I loved your analogy about getting the best steak chef in the world to work at a vegan restaurant. I'm going to use that at some point.
Yeah, take it. It's yours, yeah.
So, but what you're saying is absolutely true. If you're going to get a comedian who's comedic style is very unique, and you can't even use that in the films you hire him for, then what's the point?
Exactly.
So, yeah. And I find myself saying that a lot with Superman 3. Like, you're going to do this thing where Clark battles himself, but it's not going to have any real weight to it or any substance. It's just there.
Yeah.
Then what's the point?
Exactly.
Then, like you suggested earlier, you might as well have done Bizarro or something like that.
Yeah.
There's that fight scene between Clark and Superman in the junkyard, but what is it really?
Yeah.
Like, is that happening in his head? Is that really I'm not going to put anything past this film. Because, we've seen him play the game that he played in high school, with the holograms and that.
Yeah.
So is he actually having this fight scene? Like, what is it?
Yeah.
And once again, I don't think the film knows. So.
Exactly. As you were saying that, we were like, "Is this happening in his head? Is it happening for real?" And I'm like, "That's you're giving it a lot more depth than it really has." I wish it was as complex as you wondering if it was in his head or if it was real. That would make it interesting. But as it stands, you could tell the script itself has no freaking clue. They just thought it would be cool. I literally think it was a guy. I think it was the Newmans who wrote this one, David and Leslie Newman. I think it was them just going, "Wouldn't it be cool if he fought himself?" And they were just like, "Yeah, let's do that."
Yeah.
And just throw that on paper. Yeah. So
exactly.
I think we said I think we said everything that needs to be said about 3. Probably more than it needed to. But moving. No, go ahead.
No, I was going to say I felt like we spent a lot more time on that than I thought we were. We had a lot of things to say, and it's a film that we can talk about for a long time for many reasons. But it's a real shame.
Yeah. Well, next up would be Superman 4, and as we've already more or less segued into this, and I think you hit the nail on the head by saying it was a movie that had the heart and the idea, but it had no budget. At this point, Superman 4 had been bought up by the Cannon Group, and for 80s buffs, they're familiar that the Cannon Group was notorious for sort of overstating their budgets and then dramatically cutting them just before production started, which is like I can't. It's so unbelievably unethical. It's amazing that company didn't get bankrupt right away. At that point, they were putting all their money into Superman 4 because that was going to be their big special effects piece, and that was going to be the movie that carried them into a new decade. Instead, it carried them right into the dumpster along with Superman. I think the budget was supposed to be around $40 million, if I'm correct, possibly a little less than that. And then they dramatically slashed it before production started, and it really shows the effects in this way. It's like I said, I think that the movie has a lot of heart, but the effects really are stomach turning when you watch them. Compared to the movies that compared to the first one that was made a decade before, the effects are lax, and it's sad when you look at it that way, though.
It really is. While its ambitions and its intentions were good, the script also has a ton of problems, and just as many problems, really, as Superman 3. The fact that I love the notion of Superman saying, "I'm going to get rid of all the world's nuclear weapons."
Yeah.
And him give himself that duty, and then realizing, I shouldn't be doing this. I can't make the world's decisions for them. I love that as a concept. Yeah. It's not followed through properly, and they don't use Lex Luthor properly in this film.
I agree.
He's there because he's Lex Luthor, and Gene Hackman was willing to come back.
Yeah.
Nuclear Man is the most ridiculous thing ever. He has an N on his leotard. Yeah. He was created by putting Lex's DNA and a mini suit strapped to a nuclear missile. It was
Superman's DNA. It was Superman's. It was the strand of hair that they were able to conveniently cut.
See, I was thrown off because he has Lex's voice.
So is he a love child of Lex and Superman? Is that what I'm supposed to take from this? Like, is Nuclear Man supposed to be
but done wrong?
Yeah. They really messed that up.
He got his strand of hair. They go to the museum where the tour guide says, the best thing in the Superman exhibit, Superman gave us a strand of his hair. Yeah. And they're so happy about this. And it's like, wow, You're proud of the fact that he gave you a strand of hair? Super hair, but seriously?
Yeah. And also, that's really... That goes down to, for me... That goes down with Superman revealing that he has a problem seeing through lead in Superman the movie, and then lending a strand of his hair to a museum. He has that bad habit of inviting supervillains to come after him. It's always as if like he's doing it on purpose to see how long it takes for Lex Luthor to devise something. He just leaves little what's it called, Easter eggs out there to see how long Lex takes before he devises some sort of a dastardly plan around it. The Nuclear Man
also, Lex, takes the piece of hair by cutting it with scissors.
Yeah, easily.
And that's
just snip.
The purpose of the hair being able to support, 1,000 pounds or whatever it was doing.
Yeah. So,
there's a stupid thing.
And I'd say that was probably the film's least problem, was the logic behind that. But I love the fact that he has this, sent to the sun, this device attaches to a nuclear weapon that he knows Superman will hurl into the sun, which I thought was somewhat clever. It's a Lex Luthor thing to do. He's expecting Superman to do something, so he wants to make Superman sort of cause his own undoing. I think that's very classic Lex. However, I didn't know that there was a costume designer in the sun who apparently was able to get this guy's measurements, build him a nice gold and black suit, complete with an N on his chest. And I also didn't know there was a hairstylist in there to make him look like Dolph Lundgren in Masters of the Universe.
Exactly.
But there are things that I can accept in a comic book movie, but at this point, the verisimilitude that Donner swore an oath by in that first movie and most of the second is completely thrown out the window in the third and fourth movies. It's as if they give up on the idea of that honesty and sort of go in favor of what, as you were saying earlier, what made the Adam West Batman movies, Adam West TV show so satirical, was that it's saying, at the end of the day, it seems like the writers just sort of shrug their shoulders and go, it's a comic book. Just do whatever.
Yeah, exactly. I wouldn't be surprised if they literally did that.
Mm.
And the most ironic thing is, it's stupider than any material that's been in the comic book.
Yeah.
Like Nuclear Man, I'll never be able to understand how they thought that was a good idea.
Yeah.
And why exactly John Cryer is in this film. It's like Lex's nephew or something.
Yeah.
Like...
Lenny Luthor.
God.
Yeah, that character... I'm convinced. I think they brought him in as because at the time, Pretty in Pink came out, and that was really popular, and so they thought bringing someone from the Brat Pack in would bring some more people to the audience. That as a marketing decision, I understand, and also I guess they wanted to have him have another henchman that was stupid. So instead of Otis, we got Lenny this time. I've definitely seen worse things than Lenny Luthor. I'd say that there's so many other issues with this movie, but that in particular, I could definitely see why most people would have an issue with that character. And I do agree that Hackman's not used nearly enough, considering he was willing to come back. He does have the best line in the movie. I think it's such a great line. I'm so sad it becomes from such a disaster of a film. He says, nobody wants war. I just want to keep the threat alive. And I think that is so true. I think that to me embodies true villainy. Modern villainy, especially nowadays, when you look at people, you look at corporations or kind of like that soulless look at the world, where they don't really want peace; they want constant conflict as to keep the cash flow. And I think that is for me the most Lex Luthor line said in any of the films. And I like I said, I wish that he had more screen time. Oh, I also wish the film was more well put together. But I think that this movie had potential of having some of the best Lex Luthor material in it.
Yeah. There's one Lex moment I like in this film as well, where Clark goes to their building that he randomly has, and he's got like a mask on. He goes, "Hey, it's your old pal Lex."
Yeah.
I so much.
Yeah, the dialogue between them is great in that scene when he says, "Why don't you get a hobby, a puppy, something?" And Superman says, "It's common knowledge that you hate children and animals." So it's a great back and forth. Their chemistry is still spot on, and that one scene that they have together is really terrific. It's a shame that they only have that one scene together. And you would think that they would be so gung ho about getting Hackman and Reeve back for this movie that they would have written more scenes for the two of them. But it was all for naught.
Exactly. It's a shame that they wasted him in such a poor film.
Yeah.
And the what we were talking about earlier with the special effects, I mean, that whole sequence on the moon, and it's all so terrible looking, and like even the opening credit sequence, it's such a shame that this film is bad on so many levels.
Yeah, that opening credit sequence, that Superman shield it looks like someone cut it out of cardboard and held it in front of the camera and then whooshed it behind the fake Earth. It's fascinating to me.
Awesome, actually.
It's fascinating to me that this movie came out almost 10 years after Superman 1, but the first movie looks better. And that's never the way it should be. The last movie in a franchise usually should look better than the first one, because effects grow with the time.
Can fly in the first one, and not so much in the last one.
That should have been the tagline in the poster. You're not going to so much believe a man could fly on the poster of Superman 4. The classic story is Tom Mankiewicz told Christopher Reeve, advised him against doing the story about the nuclear warheads. He said Superman should never solve known Earth problems, like real life problems, because it creates a bittersweet atmosphere with the audience, because it makes them realize that there isn't a Superman to come in and save us from nuclear annihilation. And it kind of takes you out of the movie, and that's why. Interestingly enough, I think that Reeve played with that a little bit, and like you said, he does make the effort to try and rid the world of nuclear weapons, only to realize at the end that it's something that he can't do, and obviously with a more fleshed out film, and obviously more time and a better budget, I think that idea that would have been a great lesson for Superman to learn, and it would really give emotional weight to the film. That if there's one thread throughout the films, probably save for 3, is that Superman always tries to control the fate. And whether it be spinning the world backwards to save Lois, or giving up his powers to be with her, and then trying to get them back, there always seems to be this God complex that he needs to overcome. And I think the fourth movie, with a better, just as a better film, would have really seen the end of that. Would have seen him conquer that God complex, where he would try and save the world from nuclear warheads, and then he would realize that he simply cannot be that kind of that intergalactic policeman, that godlike figure who controls the fate of the planet. He has to let history go, as his father said. He cannot interfere with human history. So the fourth movie had the chance of wrapping up one of the most famous lines from the first movie, was, "It is forbidden for you to interfere with human history." And it's really a shame that we could have gotten a really amazing final movie for that franchise had it been in the right hands.
Exactly. And as I've said, Reeves' original idea was good. Like, I like that in concept. In execution, it was poor.
Yeah.
But or even like that stuff in the film isn't even the bad part of the film.
Yeah.
There's another subplot in the film where Daily Planet gets bought.
Yeah.
And once again, I think that's a thing that worked in concept.
Yeah.
Like this business that gets taken over by someone who has hip and new ideas and all that garbage.
It's tabloid garbage that he wants.
Yeah, exactly. I like that. I don't love how that's overshadowed by this woman trying to get Clark to like her, and they go on the double date with Lois and Superman. That's just, to me, Clark Kent would never do that.
Yeah.
He's not stupid enough to do that.
Yeah.
So that's a shame.
They never go into that either. Like in the movie, clearly Superman and Lois still have something going on. He still loves her and confides in her. And then he date rapes her again by giving her the amnesia kiss, which he's really got to stop doing to that poor woman. He's going to give her a brain tumor. But
exactly.
with Mariel Hemingway's character Lacey. Clearly she's interested in Clark, but they never really explain why Clark is going along with it. Does he like her? Is he semi-whoring himself out to her so that she won't, so that her and her father don't dismantle the Daily Planet? They never really get into that.
An interesting angle could have been him saying, she likes me for being Clark. No one's ever done that before.
Exactly.
And him being interested for that reason. Like, Lois loves Superman. She doesn't love Clark. Mm-hmm. This girl likes Clark. Mm-hmm. And that could have been an interesting... they could have gone somewhere with that. Yeah. Where he was like, someone actually likes Clark Kent? That's... maybe this is something I should pursue. Yeah. But I don't think that thought even crossed the writer's mind when they put that together. Yeah. But I think that could have been interesting.
Yeah. And if it was to be the last of the Reeve films, it would have been interesting if Lois did see Lacey into Clark, and then all of a sudden it sparks her jealousy, and pretty soon she realizes that she's always had a thing for Clark, and then she sees the man behind him, and then once she falls in love with Clark, then as Superman, he's able to sort of drop the facade and realize that she's not just in love with Superman. She actually loves the whole package. She loves the quirkiness about him. She loves the fact that he can be a buffoon. She loves everything about him. And then that could have wrapped up the Lois and Superman love story. But I think that they also were writing this movie with a possibility of even a fifth one. Because I know that even after this movie bombed, there were still talks of a fifth movie, and I have no idea how. But I think there were talks about a fifth movie while making the fourth film.
There probably was. Yeah. Just as there was with Batman and Robin, there was talks of Batman Triumphant. I mean, I don't think either production ever expected the fourth film to bomb the way both of those films did. And it's interesting the parallels that the Superman franchise and the Batman franchise have. Yeah. And I think those parallels will continue with Man of Steel and Batman Begins. Yeah. I definitely think Batman Forever is a far superior film to Superman 3. Oh, yeah. But it's interesting the parallels there, and were they to have done a Superman 5, I'd be interested to know what they were thinking of doing. There was plenty of other films they planned to do before they finally settled on Superman Returns. Yeah. Including Superman vs. Batman, and Superman Flyby, Superman whatever. Superman Lives. They had a lot of ideas. A Superman 5 could have been interesting.
Yeah, I know that after 4, it had gone and turned around several times. I think the rights reverted back to the Salkinds, and then they produced the Superboy TV series.
Boy. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Finishing up on Superman 4, I'd say it always reverts back to what we started in saying, is that it had the heart, it had an idea, it had a few ideas actually going for it. I think had all the threads in this movie been explored, you could have had a potentially fantastic movie. But I will give them all the credit in the world that they had their heart in the right place making this film, and Chris Reeve and everyone involved wanted to make something special. They wanted to pay homage to the first film. So with that being said, there was a huge gap after Superman 4. And as I said, there were multiple projects, including Superman Lives with Tim Burton as director, and I think Kevin Smith worked on a script, and he has a hilarious people. If you haven't seen it, the Evening with Kevin Smith, where he explains how he met John Peters, the producer, and it's hilarious. John Peters. Who apparently was Barbra Streisand's former hairstylist, who then became the producer of Batman in 1989, was producing this. And evidently the main points that he wanted Kevin Smith to follow in making this was he needed Superman not to be in the red and blue suit. He didn't want to see Superman fly. He needed to see Superman fight polar bears at some point. He wanted a homosexual robot henchman for Brainiac. and then he wanted a giant spider to face Superman at the end of the movie. It's a wonder how this movie didn't get off the ground, because it just sounds like such a terrific idea.
He got his giant spider.
He got it in Wild Wild West.
In Wild Wild West, yeah.
Good for him. Clearly that worked. Yeah, after that, there were multiple projects. I know J.J. Abrams wrote a script at some point, and I love J.J. Abrams, but his script was terrible. I read it, and I'm grateful that wasn't chosen. I know. I
didn't know that was available to read. Oh, I've got to get this.
Yeah, I honestly, I wish I had saved it, but I must. Back when Superman Returns was in production, I got back into my Superman craze and was watching. I got back into Smallville, and I was reading up a lot of on Superman, and I was looking at a lot of the abandoned scripts, and that was one I came across. And when I got to the point where they made Lex Luthor a Kryptonian, that was when I bowed out. But that's neither here nor there. It's interesting. If you could find it, take a read. I know McG was attached at some point. That was when things felt like they were actually forming. I think I remembered watching an interview with Anthony Hopkins when he was promoting Red Dragon back in 2002, and he said that he had been cast as Jor-El, which I thought was brilliant casting. And you see that with him as Odin in Thor. You realize that he would have been a perfect Jor-El. And I forget what actors they were looking at, a multitude of actors for Superman, but. Eventually that fell through, and then when I heard that Bryan Singer was going to do Superman, the new one, before it was called Superman Returns, I remember really having this sense, a bittersweet feeling, because part of me was jumping up and down in joy because I love Bryan Singer as a director. I love Usual Suspects. I love the first two X-Men films. And another part of me was heartbroken because I realized that means he wasn't doing X-Men 3. And we all know how that turned out. And don't get me started. I know you particularly have a vendetta against that film, and I totally understand that. And we could definitely talk about that when we get to James Marsden in this movie. But Superman Returns was inevitably the film that ended up being made, and I remember loving this film when it came out. I saw it 3 times in the theater, and I absolutely was head over heels for it. And I know the main reason I loved it was because at the time I was such a Donner junkie. I must have watched Superman the movie on a loop, God knows how many times, and I was a part of that clan that was anticipating the Donner cut of Superman 2 to be released, and I think the nostalgia of seeing and hearing all the throwbacks to the previous movies was the main reason why I loved that. Main reason I loved the movie. Looking back on it, the film has a lot of problems. Namely, it was self-indulgent, and I don't think Bryan Singer would even deny this. This was a pet project of his. It was something that he clearly wanted to do. I think it was, as a fan, we can all sympathize with when we see a bad sequel. We always think about how we would have done it, and I think Singer got to act it out. Singer clearly didn't like 3 and 4. He even ignored their continuity. And he made his own Superman 3, which felt more like a rehash of Superman 1. But it has its issues. I think there are plenty of positives to it, and I can still watch it and really enjoy it. But I don't understand the rabid hatred for it. I think the people's hatred for it goes a little overboard. But I do agree the film has issues.
This is one of those films where I think it's a good film.
Mm-hmm.
If you've never seen the Donner films,
mm-hmm.
I think it's a really good film to watch.
Yeah.
Once again, in concept, I like it.
Mm-hmm.
Superman has come back after being gone for so many years, and the world doesn't need him anymore. So where does he fit?
Yeah.
That's a cool concept.
It's a great concept.
And it's good to deal with that in 2006. I think that was valid.
Yeah.
Singer's intentions once again were noble.
Yeah.
And he got to make his Superman. Like when we were talking about earlier about people's versions of Batman. Like he got to make his vision or his version of Superman.
Yeah.
What he thinks of when he sees Superman, he put that on screen.
Yeah.
And like you said, he did the sequel to Superman 2 that he wanted to do.
Yeah.
I have a hard time criticizing it because that's what the film is.
Exactly.
At the same time, I think that the film is well cast for a Superman film that is not that.
I agree.
I think Brandon Routh is an excellent Superman.
I agree.
I'm not sure if he was the right person to follow up on being Christopher Reeve. Because you can't follow up on Christopher Reeve.
You can't.
There's only one.
Mm.
So I think he's a good Superman in another film.
I agree.
I think Kate Bosworth gets a lot of unnecessary flack for being Lois.
Yeah.
And I think she's a Lois that would have worked in a different film.
Yeah.
Once again, following up on Margot Kidder, she wasn't the right choice.
No, not even close.
No. I think Frank Langella works in any Superman film. That's very
Frank Langella works in anything. Frank Langella works in anything, period. You can put him in absolutely. Yes. You could have put him in the new Superman movie, and he would work perfectly. He's just one of those actors.
I agree. Kevin Spacey is another. I think is a person that works as any Lex Luthor.
I agree.
I think there's enough of the business tycoon and enough of the mad scientist to fit just perfectly. I really love him as Lex.
Me too. Yeah, I remember that was one of my biggest anticipatory points was seeing Spacey as Luthor back in 2006. Yeah,
I think even with different scripts, he's able to do different Lex Luthors, and I really love him as Lex.
Me too.
And I think his performance is hilarious. As well as menacing.
Yeah.
I think he manages. Maybe the balance is a little tipped more towards the comedic side.
Yeah.
But I think he's got enough that he can show he could be a great Lex Luthor.
I agree.
As far as I like Sam Huntington as Jimmy Olsen.
Yeah, he was perfect as Jimmy Olsen.
Yeah, once again, I'm not sure if he was right to follow up on
Mark McClure.
Forgetting that actor's name.
Mark McClure.
Played Jimmy in Sorry, what was his name?
Mark McClure.
Yes. Marty McFly's brother. Back in
yes.
I think Sam Huntington's a good Jimmy. I'm not sure if he was the right person to follow up on the young, youthful Jimmy that was wide-eyed and very optimistic. His Jimmy was different.
Yeah, very quirky, very modern.
More in tune with the Jimmy of that time in comics. So, I think this film, it works on a lot of levels and doesn't on others.
Yeah.
Actual effects are fantastic.
Oh, yeah.
I think the scene where he catches the aeroplane is brilliant.
That is a breathtaking sequence. I still think that is... It's so underrated. It's one of those sequences that when people bitch about not having enough action, I'm like, all right, so he may not be fighting a supervillain, but seeing him try and save that plane from hurling into the atmosphere like that was breathtaking, and they did a beautiful job with that sequence.
I agree. There's a lot of sequences here that are interesting for me to watch since they filmed it in Sydney. Yeah. And I remember when they practically shut down the city to film Superman going to hospital. Mm-hmm. It's interesting. But, I think the film is good, and it's one of those films that people disliked more over time. At the time, you look at its score on Rotten Tomatoes, it's in the 70s. Like, that's a good film.
I remember the critics were very seemingly unanimous about their positive reviews when it came out. I remember back, I think website doesn't exist anymore. It would round up it's similar to Rotten Tomatoes. It rounds up the ratings, and I remember it getting like a B+, and I was very excited about that because it was. A lot of the comic book movies had sort of been taking hits at that time, and to see that higher rating, I was really excited. And then all of a sudden, this sort of pouring out of negative reactions from the audience. And then over time, reading these very nasty, hateful, angry speeches about this movie, I can understand why one wouldn't like it, but I don't understand why one would hate it with such a degree. Like Batman and Robin. gets under my skin, and it breaks my heart when I watch it, because I don't know how they let it happen. It's like a travesty. Spider-Man 3 angers me a great deal, but I just don't understand why Superman Returns ignites this sort of fiery hatred that a lot of people have, especially considering, I mean, they bitched enough, and now we have a new Superman, which, you know, I look forward to. But I think one of the main reasons, and people want to say that the movie was a failure, and it really wasn't. The box office was slightly disappointing because that Pirates of the Caribbean abomination came out that year. Dead Man's Chest, which for me personally, I despise that movie. I know a lot of people enjoyed it, but that was the first Pirates of the Caribbean sequel. That was before it got dried out. And I remember the hype around that film was such that Superman Returns actually bumped up its release date a week as to try and give it a chance. And Superman Returns did well, but if it had Pirates of the Caribbean come out a couple of weeks later, I think Superman Returns would have cleaned up a lot stronger. People think that its intake was modest because the film wasn't good. The intake was modest because it was going up against the first Pirates of the Caribbean sequel, and you don't want to be anywhere in town when that kind of heat comes out, you know? So people seem to like to rewrite history based on their own opinions.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at 2006, the highest grossing film was Pirates of the Caribbean 2. Yeah. Then it was The Da Vinci Code. Then it was one of the Ice Age films. Then it was Casino Royale. Yeah. Then it was Man at the Museum. Mm-hmm. I don't know why that's so high up, but it is. Yeah. Then it was Cars. Then it was X-Men The Last Stand. Yeah. Then Mission Impossible 3. Then Superman Returns. Then Happy Feet. Yeah. Like, you look at the star power of that year. Yeah. You know, the rebirth of James Bond. Yeah. Da Vinci Code, a film that people wanted to see for years.
And the controversy.
Yeah, X-Men 3, Mission Impossible 3. Like, you had so many big-time films that year. Yeah. I feel like you're right in saying that, I mean, it made nearly, how much did it made nearly 400 million worldwide.
400 million worldwide, yeah.
Like, since when is that a non-success?
It's the same people who are calling Star Trek Into Darkness a failure. The film made, I think, 90 million its opening instead of 100 million, and immediately people called it a flop. And I'm like, I don't understand where these people go. I don't know where they get their Hollywood education from, but in my mind, a $90 million opening is a huge hit. I don't know. I think that just comes down to bias, but in terms of the film itself, I agree, particularly with Kevin Spacey as Lex Luthor. I think the only thing I have an issue with the character is I felt as though they didn't know what they wanted to do with him. At the opening of the film, if you watch the film again, you will see a dramatic shift in tone with his character, where in the beginning of the movie, he is very dark and quiet, and you can see that years in prison have really hardened him. And the Gods Are Selfish Beings speech shows that his attitude has drastically changed, and he is a more philosophical and personal take on this now. It's not I want land, it's I want Superman's heart. I want to bring that man down, and I want to use his Kryptonian technology to make myself a god. And to me, that makes him so much more threatening and frightening. But then, towards the end of the movie, he does get into he gets into more darkly comedic, like Hackman. And he played that part well, too, but it felt as though, it felt like we had two different writer perspectives when making that character. One of them, I think, wanted to do John Byrne's Lex Luthor, while the other one wanted more of a continuation of Hackman's Luthor. And I think that's why we get sort of an uneven performance. Not so much uneven performance, but an uneven just treatment of the character.
Yeah, I think that comes from Michael Dougherty and Dan Harris, I think, are comic book fans. Yeah. And they wrote the screenplay, and I think they wrote more of a comic book Lex Luthor, whereas Bryan Singer originally wrote a more Gene Hackman-like Lex. Yeah. So, yeah, I wanted to talk about... we might as well talk about it now. The notion of Superman having a child. That's the make or break point for a lot of people with this film. Yeah. I'm not for it, but I'm not against it. I think it's an interesting concept.
Yeah.
I feel I don't think it's properly thought out in terms of origin. Like, was this kid? Like, it's insinuated that this kid was the product of Lois and Clark in the fortress.
Yeah.
And yet, he would have to have left straight after the fight with Zod, and then Lois gets with James Marsden's character.
Yeah.
And you know what I mean? Like, the timing of it
feels off.
Is a little off.
Yeah, because he was gone for 5 years, they said, and I think the boy is supposed to be about 5. Or is he? He looks older than 5.
He looks older than 5, but I think he's meant to be 5.
Yeah, he definitely looks older than 5, and you're right. He would have had to literally, the moment at the end of Superman 2 when he says, "Mr. President, I won't let you down again," he would have had to fly right into outer space and then abandon Earth, which really kind of makes him sound like a dick. If that is the case, if he just kind of just blasted into outer space the moment he said he won't leave the president again. But the timeline does seem a bit off. It's I think that is what lends itself to the issue of this film, is that Singer really wanted to make a Superman 3, but at the same time he had to make his own film, and as a result you get half and half almost, and it feels kind of like a hybrid where some elements feel like it is directly linked to Christopher Reeve's Superman films, other elements feel like it's either a reboot or its own film, and it feels disjointed at times, and I think that's what some people have a great issue with. I know Confused Matthew made a review of it a couple of years ago, and he said it best where he doesn't. Sometimes in the movie, if without any context, it feels as though sometimes it wants to be a reboot, sometimes it wants to be a sequel, sometimes it wants to be a remake. And I agree with that point. I think that sometimes it does have. I think it does have sort of an identity crisis. But that being said, I agree with you on the positives of the film. I think that Brandon Routh is a terrific Superman, and I think that the fact that he was playing the Reeves Superman was working against him. Same thing with Kate Bosworth. She played a different Lois Lane, not following Margot Kidder. I think she would have been given a bigger chance. I think that overall, and then with the trouble with the kid is following up from Superman 2, using that as the explanation for the child's existence, also creates a discontinuity. So it's funny how either seeing Superman 1 and 2 could either really help the film in your eyes or it could really hurt the film in your eyes. So I think that it really comes down to the script being rather uneven.
I agree. Yeah, it's an uneven script with good intentions. It's a good film, not a perfect film. In fact, far from it.
Yeah,
I think it's a shame that so many people dislike it because I agree that it might have underperformed in terms of this being Superman's giant return, and it didn't make the money that Pirates 2 made. And I get that that notion, but to call this a failure is just beyond stupid.
I think the marketing also failed the film too. I remember when I remember vividly that marketing campaign. The teaser trailer was released in December the year previous, and it was a big teaser. It had Marlon Brando's Jor-El, and I remember and I remember that teaser blowing everyone away, and then we didn't see a theatrical trailer until 6 months later. I don't remember seeing a full theatrical trailer for that film until possibly May or even early June, because the film was supposed to come out in, I think, early July, and then it came out in late June instead. And I remembered week after week going on movie websites being like, did they cancel this movie? Because there is no trailer. And then they literally bottled, I'd say, about 6 months worth of advertising into about a half a month. And there were people out there who didn't know Superman movie even was coming out. And you go out now. If you go out now, for the past 4 or 5 months, people have been talking about Man of Steel because the
marketing for Man of Steel has been kind
beautiful.
of the opposite.
The complete opposite.
Made too much out.
Yeah. Yeah, it is funny how that works. I guess they learned from their mistake on that one, but Returns, I think, had very poor marketing, and they didn't really, and they could have had a slam dunk with that if they had tried just a little harder, and also maybe the release date a little earlier than Pirates 2. But that's not here nor there. But I think also, once again, with the kids, like I said, I don't mind it either. I don't think it's the worst thing in the world. I think some people felt it was a bit soap opera-ish, but then again, there are many elements of comic book that feel soap opera-ish. I think that the movie itself looks beautiful, and I think that it has such amazing set pieces. When he saves Lois, Richard, and Jason from the yacht that was sinking into the ocean, the kryptonite landmasses, and I just think everything looks terrific. It's such a great looking film, and it has a really solid cast, and it's great. The musical score, the John Williams musical score, is back in action. It has a lot going for it, but it does have quite a bit working against it as well. It's really hard for me to call the film a failure, and it's hard for me to say that the film is bad. I think it's a good film, and I think if people revisit it, I think maybe if they revisit it after The Man of Steel comes out, I think that people will lighten up a little bit, because maybe they'll finally get their movie where Superman beats the unholy hell out of some bad guys, and they'll be able to look back and they'll realize Superman Returns was not the abysmal failure that they made it out to be. But in the meantime, it seems as though the movie is quite hated.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that, because I could see the exact opposite also happening, where people are like, "Yeah, this is the film that we should have gotten. Fuck this film." I feel like people could really turn against. I thought after Batman Begins and The Dark Knight that people were maybe kind of ready to forgive Joel Schumacher.
Yeah.
And I feel like the opposite has happened, where he's become even more notoriously hated.
Yeah.
And that's a shame.
Yeah.
Because the problem, I don't think, was him. I think it was the studio.
That was the studio. I mean, he did apologize for it. I mean, there's that video on YouTube. Everyone has seen it. He's noble enough to say that he was an adult and he still made the decision to do the film as he did. But I despise Batman and Robin. It's hard for me to sit through it. It really is. It turns my stomach. But I'm certainly not calling for his head, and I'm definitely not going to suddenly say that all of his films are terrible because of it. But I think that there are certain stigmas that people immediately it's almost cliched at this point that they just adhere to, such as Batman Forever and Batman and Robin are apparently the same movie in some people's eyes, which is ridiculous. And in some people's eyes, Superman Returns was a major bomb, and Superman needs to be punching things in order for a film to be for it to be a solid superhero movie or a solid Superman film. But that's common thought for you.
Yeah, I like I said earlier, I understand why people are like, Superman doesn't fight anybody. Like, I get why people were thinking that when they were so used to seeing that by that point.
Mm.
But it's not necessary to make the film good. And is Superman a little stalkerish? Yeah, he kind of hangs around, the window a little too long. That's a little strange. But, this is a Superman that has come back where the world doesn't need him.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, shit, what's my purpose?
Yeah.
I don't feel like they delved into that enough.
No, they definitely didn't.
They showed him lingering around and flying into the sky, kind of sad, and hanging around Lois's house. But we see him being sad, and because he has no one to talk to about it, he can't speak to Jor-El about it in the fortress or anything like that. Although he should be able to. Yeah,
apparently in this, the fortress is still standing.
Yeah, the fortress is still there.
Yeah.
And, Lex is able to talk to Jor-El.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Anyway,
that's once again, it's another one of those where if you watch the original films, it's exciting to see Brando, but then if you've watched the original films, why the hell is that happening? Why is that still? Yeah,
it's like I don't get why they do the thing with Jor-El saying, "My son, speak.
Yeah,
tell me everything." But I thought he also was able to talk to Clark as if he was actually there.
Yeah. As opposed to thinking that whoever is standing there is his son.
Yeah.
Maybe Lex is looking at a rerun or something, and that's the reason why Jor-El already went through that spiel with Kal-El a couple of decades earlier. So he's watching an old Crystal. Who knows how that weird Kryptonian technology works out? What's it called? One thing that bothers me about the film is particularly is the potential to do with Lex Luthor is I think it would have been fascinating if Superman came back and found out that Lex was released from prison and that he has told the world he has a new lease on life, and maybe he's now a philanthropist, and wouldn't that be a real kick in the ass that he comes home and finds his worst enemy being looked upon as a hero? I think that would have been such a fascinating story. But at the end, it becomes it degenerates into a land scheme again. And I think it was fine in the first film. It really gave you a good chuckle in the second film that he still managed to work in a land scheme with all this cosmic battles going on. But then once you get to Superman Returns and he's still fighting for land, it really feels like you're beating a dead horse. And you'd figure a genius like Lex, who has seen these battles between these titans and realizes that the universe is so big, you figured he would think bigger than just having beachfront property at this point, and he would set his eyes on something bigger.
And it's also, I don't understand his logic of, I'm going to have advanced alien technology.
Yeah.
It's like, well, how? You're going to have these islands made of kryptonite, that's it.
Yeah.
The crystals don't also create, all the technology that Clark has in the Fortress. Like, I that's poorly thought out.
Yeah.
But so there are some things that don't quite work.
Mm.
But like we've been saying, overall, I think the film's good.
I do enjoy the film. I could probably pop it on and sit back and enjoy it and have it. And I still I have a lot of fond memories of it. I remember loving it when I saw it when it first came out, and I still enjoy it. I do agree, like from a certain standpoint, it definitely has stuff working against it. It does seem to have an identity crisis at times. But I still think that the film in itself, I think, is still a good film. I just I think that it has this, like I said, an unnecessary amount of hatred surrounding it. Also I feel as though I don't know why James Marsden was in the film personally. I mean, I adore him, and I understand. Like, I understood they wanted to give a love interest to Lois. But I don't know why James Marsden keeps agreeing to play the guy that doesn't end up with the girl in these movies. I mean, does he enjoy not being the lead man who gets the woman at the end? He lost out to Wolverine, he lost out to Superman. It just seems to be his deal.
Yeah, it's a shame. I think that's going away a little bit because Hollywood is kind of starting to see him as sort of a leading man.
Yeah,
it's about time, but. For the longest time, it was like The Notebook.
Even though he lost out to Ryan Gosling too, he loses out to he's always the guy who doesn't get the girl at the end of the day. Yeah,
it's a shame.
Yeah.
But I think Marsden is a tragically underrated actor.
I agree.
And people have often said, "Oh, how can you like James Marsden when Cyclops was killed because he didn't return?" I said, well, no, that wasn't it.
No, it wasn't it at all.
The fact that Hugh Jackman was able to do X-Men 3 and The Prestige and Scoop and The Fountain and be on stage doing Boy from Oz all in 1 year.
Yeah.
And still be the lead in X-Men 3.
Yeah.
James Marsden filmed Superman Returns. And they couldn't put him in the film.
Yeah. I don't buy that at all. I think that, that movie has a lot of issues. I think the fact that it didn't have a complete script before the film, during the film, or even after the film, it didn't have a complete script. I mean, even on the commentary, Ratner was very blunt about how they never had a finished script. But I think that the biggest issue with that is, I agree, they could have worked him in. And if they needed him sidelined for a while, and maybe if they only had him for a short time, all they had to do was make us think that he was dead, and then have him come back at the end for the big moment where he has to take out Jean Grey. But,
which is what I thought they were going to do when they didn't show him die on screen.
Yeah. Like he would show up and tell Wolverine to step aside because he has to deal with this or something like that. I don't know, something more in tune with.
I thought they could have dealt with their psychic link, and even though it's never addressed in the films, but he could have calmed Jean down, maybe.
Yeah.
And, and bring the real Jean, or the real Jean is actually Phoenix, which is kind of depressing, but this fake Jean that Scott's fallen in love with that Xavier created.
Yeah.
He could have brought that out, and with his help, that be the full force, and then you realize at the end, Wolverine shouldn't be chasing this girl that's clearly in love with Scott.
Exactly.
And then he moves on. That could have been cool, but anyway, that's not Superman. So,
it was James Marsden. It was his fault. We got sidetracked. But I mean, we pretty much we covered the 5 existing Superman, or 6 if you include the Donner cut. So we covered the 6 Superman films, and it seems that we're more positive than we are with the negative. As Superman 1, 2, the Donner cut, and Returns, we agree, pretty solid films. Some great and some good. 3 and 4 obviously were both awful, but that's commonplace. But to briefly build up to Man of Steel, I think as I said at the beginning of this, I think that this will be for DC Comics and for Superman what Iron Man was back in 2008. I think it's going to be the film that not reignites but ignites something that that's going to follow us through for the next few years.
I agree. I'm not going to be shocked if this is the beginning of leading towards Justice League as well. Yeah. They've been constantly saying, you don't have definitive plans for it and all that sort of thing. I think...
That's a lie.
It's
a blatant lie.
I say that, Henry Cavill has been saying that. I don't know, maybe if we want to.
Yeah.
Where it's Warner Brothers have been, allegedly searching for a director, though they've been doing that for a year basically now. So I don't... I don't think we're necessarily close to having a Justice League film, but I feel like this is the beginning.
Yeah.
And I think if this film is a success, then they will say, hey, let's try and, now we can do the Batman reboot, now we can look at doing Wonder Woman and maybe doing another Green Lantern, all that sort of stuff, and then they can finally do Justice League properly.
I agree.
I think Warner Brothers are really angry that Marvel did it first. After all the Justice League films that they had planned in the past, and Marvel managed to do it and be one of the most successful films of all time.
Yeah.
I think Warner Brothers,
it
they
burned
hate
them.
the fact that happened, and I'm sure they thought Dark Knight Rises will be the most successful film of last year. And it wasn't.
It was. I don't think it was. I don't think it was in. Was it? It was in the top 5.
I think it was in the top 3.
Uh-huh.
I think it went Avengers, Skyfall, then Rises.
Wow, it got beaten out by Bond and the Avengers. Yeah, I mean it did. I mean Dark Knight Rises did very well, but also we have to. I think it's safe to say that the at least over here it affected the shootings over in.
Yes, I agree.
I think that definitely hurt the box office. But who's to say it would have beaten the Avengers even had that tragedy not occurred? But I do agree
Avengers
that
is also in 3D, and that people are blind if they think that doesn't boost up the box office because tickets are more expensive.
Yeah.
I think Man of Steel. It's not a bad plan to make Man of Steel in 3D as well. Yeah. It originally wasn't going to do that. They weren't going to do that, and then they did. That is probably a Warner Brothers decision. I doubt Nolan and Snyder wanted to do that.
Probably not.
Yeah, especially Nolan. But,
Nolan has gone out and saying that he doesn't like the 3D craze, and he stated that he prefers to shoot his films in IMAX for perfect picture. But I think that they are definitely planting seeds. First off, there's Goyer and Nolan were smart enough. One of the characters in the film is Dr. Emil Hamilton, played by Richard Schiff, and I noticed I saw his name. I saw him in the film, and I thought to myself, that character is not exclusive to Superman. He is more of a Justice League character who has constantly, who has frequently been allied to them, as well. Green Lantern, which didn't do particularly well, but they had the Amanda Waller character.
Exactly. That's what I was going to say. I feel like they did that because they thought down the line, we're going to bring her back for Justice League.
Yeah.
And it's a shame. Yeah. But I'm going to say this. I'm cool with them including Green Lantern into a Justice League film with Ryan Reynolds, and that film being part of it. I didn't hate that film so much that I can't have that.
Yeah, I agree. And I think he would do better. I think Ryan Reynolds would do better in the ensemble cast than he would carrying the film himself. I think being a supporting role as Hal Jordan to Henry Cavill and whomever may be playing Batman at the time, I think that would be fine. And I think that people would gain a new appreciation for the character and for him if he does well in that. And that could very well lead to a proper Green Lantern follow-up where people maybe it's similar to the positive reaction people have had to the Hulk now, where I think that they're actually comfortable with moving forward with him as an individual character because Mark Ruffalo was so well received in the Avengers. So who knows? I think that Green Lantern could very well could work in a Justice League. The one, because I just think a reboot so soon is irresponsible. I would rather them just say, this is the film we made, this is the actor we cast, and we're going to work with it, and we'll make it better. But saying, all right, we fucked up, we'll cast another actor, we'll get Bradley Cooper next year. It's like, all right, just calm down. Just, you cast him, he wasn't a disaster, the film itself was the problem, the script was the problem. Get a better script for him and put him in the same room as Cavill and the other actors and make some magic happen. But don't constantly think you have to run back to the drawing board. I mean, you guys are creative. Be creative. Yeah, some of you want to shake these people. And I think also in the trailers, if you've seen the little brief glimpses of the LexCorp sign as well, I wouldn't be surprised if the reason why they're not using him in this movie and saving him is because they can have a potentially great storyline involving him in the Justice League down the line, maybe even a President Lex Luthor story. But who knows? I mean, the doors are open for anything, and I'm glad that Snyder decided to choose a story of I don't know the way the plot's going to unfold, but from the looks of the trailers, it looks like it's very much a retelling of the origin, but at the same token, choosing Zod, who is sort of his father's nemesis, as the main bad guy in this movie, is perfect because I feel as though it will make a nice, quaint, one-off story where Zod will be the threat that Superman faces for the first time. Zod will be vanquished, and then we can open Superman up to Lex Luthor and maybe Brainiac or Doomsday or whomever may come down the pipeline after that. But I like the direction that they're going, and I feel as though we're going to get a great franchise from this.
I agree wholeheartedly. I really like the LexCorp notion. I think Lex could be in the film in the same way that the Joker was in
Batman Begins.
Yeah,
and Norman Osborn in The Amazing Spider-Man. That seems to be the trope nowadays.
Yeah, I think it's smart to not do your biggest villain straight away. Like, back in the day, they used to do that because they were never sure if they were going to do a franchise. Yeah. Now, it's almost a guarantee that some of these films will make money. Like, that was the notion with Green Lantern as well. Yeah. Doing the yellow ring at the end with Sinestro. Yeah. Because they were probably sure that this film was going to make money and they could do a sequel. Yeah. So I definitely think that maybe we won't even see Lex. Maybe we'll see the back of a bald head. We're all meant to know who that's meant to be.
Yeah, you'd have to be really dense not to know who that is while watching the film.
Yeah. I remember getting chills when I saw Batman Begins, and he,
flipped over the card.
Oh, man, that was amazing.
No, that was terrific, and I remembered, I thought that was a great way to end the movie, and Nolan has gone on record, and I believe him when he says it. He says, when we make, every time we made a Batman movie, we made it with the intention of making one film as if it was the last. And some people don't believe that because of the Joker card, but the Batman Year One, the comic book, ended with that same idea, where it could have been the last Batman movie ever, and the idea of Batman going off to fight the Joker is a perfect ending for a Batman movie. It's like, yeah, of course, that is the beginning of Batman has his origin story. Now what's he going to do? Go face his arch nemesis. That seems very appropriate. But I think since then, since Nolan did that and saving the Joker for the sequel, it's been the trope where don't show all your cards, don't show your hand, and I think also I think having Lex in this film as the main villain would have hurt the movie, which breaks my heart to say because I think I think he's such a great character. But I think the heat from Superman Returns is still that Superman faced off with I guess an unextraordinary antagonist in some people's eyes. So having him go head to head with a very menacing and clearly psychotic General Zod in this movie by Michael Shannon, I think it's gonna lighten people up. And I think when we do see that shiny bald head of his at the end of the movie, if we do, all those naysayers are gonna be really excited to see him, and it's gonna be great to see what they do with him in this franchise.
I agree. Yep, definitely. I can't wait to see what they do with this film. I can't wait for the notion of a brand new Superman franchise. Because it's been 20 years since he's actually been part of a franchise, or 30 years really. So I can't wait. Yeah,
me neither. I think it's I think we're on the verge of something pretty terrific here. But all right, so we've been talking for roughly 3 hours. What time is it over there?
It is nearly 2:45 in the afternoon.
Yeah, it's 1:45 a.m. over here. So I'm ready to call it a night, and your day is just about starting. So thank you very much, Shades. I really appreciate you joining me in this podcast.
My pleasure, John. Thank you for inviting me. It's been a lot of fun.
No, thank you. It's my pleasure, and hopefully we'll be able to do something again soon. Possibly even maybe even be able to talk about Man of Steel as a good follow up to this. And thanks again. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, man.